Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Doodle session. It's episode 11, and we've got two more to go this quarter. Today, we are exploring the topic geography, architecture, or something more. Let's find out. So, in Psalms 87, from verse 1 to 2, we discover a hymn celebrating Zion as God's specially chosen and beloved city. Hmm. That brings us to the quiz we have for you today. What is so special about Zion? Option A, geography. B, architecture. C, something more. What do you think? Now, while you're still thinking, a little background. Many centuries ago, during the Exodus from Egypt, the Lord manifested himself on Mount Sinai and commanded Israel to build him a tabernacle. Why? Well, so that he might dwell in their midst. So Moses started off, and you know the rest of the story. When the sanctuary was eventually completed and erected, the presence of God descended in a cloud and rested on the tabernacle of meeting, making it the center of divine manifestation and worship for Israel. You are probably asking, what has any of this got to do with Zion? Well, patience, we are getting there. Now, fast forward. Having arrived the promised land many years later, David conceives the idea, but Solomon builds a temple for the Lord. And interestingly, he chooses a site where God had previously manifested his presence in different ways at different times. The threshing floor of Arunah the Jebusite, which happens to be on Mount Moriah, where Abraham passed his test of faith. Again, when the temple was completed, while Solomon dedicated the temple, the Lord approved, and his glory filled the temple. Therefore, Mount Moriah was considered the holy mountain because God dwelt in his temple on Moriah. A little geography here. Mount Moriah was 600 meters north of Mount Zion, captured by David, and Mount Zion was occupying a relatively small area of the hill that came to be called the City of David, which happens to be in Jerusalem. Therefore, Zion was frequently employed interchangeably with Jerusalem, the temple, the dwelling place of God, or more precisely, the very manifestation of God's presence. Now, this explains the deep longing of the psalmist to dwell in the sanctuary. It was not so much about the geography or the architecture of the temple, it was about the presence of God and the exceptional privileges that come with that. What to remember thus far? 1. Zion was a physical, tangible representation of the manifestation of God's presence in the midst of his people. 2. Now, this idea of a physical, tangible representation of God's presence in the midst of his people was actually initiated by God himself in his quest to stay reachable in a relationship with his children, us. And number 3, beyond the beauty of the structure and spiritual relevance of his location, Zion was a place where the presence of God was made manifest and all the privileges that come with that. Are you thinking what I am thinking? These dudes, young and old, pregnant and otherwise, they all yearned to make the trip to Jerusalem just so that they could worship God in his presence, his chosen place. There were no cars, flights, solely on foot or maybe donkeys. Still, they had looked forward to it, and when they arrived, it was not nilly-willy or however they liked, but they followed God's laid down terms of engagement that their worship may be acceptable. Hmm, interesting. Why is it that today, even with the convenience of technology, we still struggle to present ourselves before God in worship? Now, even when we do, we are either almost always late or in a hurry to leave. And sometimes, even our short stay there is so distracted by every and anything else but worship. We have so trivialized the very essence of these gatherings that they have become mere rituals, so that our experience of God has remained superficial. Mm. Fact of the matter is, God is not exclusively confined to the four walls of any building. He's omnipresent and can be reached from anywhere. This truth is as true today as it was then. However, certain ordinances were exclusively performed in the sanctuary, necessitating that they make the trip. Point is, it was not about their feelings, conveniences, or preferences. It was about intentionally following God's laid down terms of engagement in worship. Today, that seems to have been substituted by every and anything else garnished with Jesus' name. One of the privileges of God's presence that we are promised is rest, peace of mind. Now, this promised rest does not necessarily mean the absence of chaos. On the contrary, it is a certainty of how it ends, regardless of the details of the present situation, knowing in whose hands we rest. It is God's ultimate desire that in Zion, synonymous with His presence, we may find hope and salvation. No matter how bad things get here, as they sure will, we can draw hope and encouragement knowing this foundational truth that as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds His people both now and forever. There are no VIPs here. This goes both for the Jews and the Gentiles. And that's it for today, folks. Thank you for joining in. Please kindly like, share, and subscribe. It is your Sabbath Doodle, doodling out. Ndeo.